Good evening, everybody. For the next hour, Local 12 will explore one of the biggest decisions teenagers and their parents will face: whether to go to college, and if you go, how will you pay for it? There are studies that show those who earn college degrees make more money, but they have to find jobs, of course, in order to do that. And in today's economy, they're going into a job market that is far from certain, and many of them are carrying student loan debt that can take a decade or more to pay off. So the questions our panel will explore tonight are how to find out what is the best path for you, whether it makes sense to wait or go to school part-time, and in fact, whether college simply isn't a sound idea at all for some people. You can join the discussion, and we hope you do, through Facebook and Twitter. Just use the hashtag #YourVoiceYourFuture. Let's go live now to the Digitorium inside Griffin Hall on the campus of Northern Kentucky University and moderator Mark Hyman.
For millions of Americans, a college education will be the most expensive purchase they'll ever make in their lifetime, aside from buying a new home. This spring, the typical graduate will have about $27,000 in student loan debt. 1 in 10 will have $40,000. Some will even have more than $100,000. Yet data shows that those who have a college education are more likely to be hired, and they certainly have the potential for greater lifetime earnings. Good evening, I'm Mark Hyman, host of Behind the Headlines. A college education, is it worth it? Well, certainly we all agree that we want to have the best possible education for the next generation so they are successful in life. But what's the trade-off? The cost of a college? What's the return of investment? How do they go about doing this? We're going to address all these issues because there's a lot of controversy and talk a whole lot more. Thank you for joining us. Now, we have an audience here who's anxious to get started with a lot of questions, and you at home can also participate, and I'll tell you about that in just a moment. But we have a terrific panel of experts who will answer the questions and debate the topic. So let's go ahead and meet them. Joining us this evening is Jeffrey Mearns. He's the president of Northern Kentucky University. Sandy Harine, she's guidance counselor for Aiken College and Career High School of Cincinnati. Helen Carroll, she's the manager of community relations for Toyota of North America. And Dr. Richard Vetter, PhD. He's professor emeritus of economics at Ohio University and director for the Center for College Affordability and Productivity. Additional information on our panelists and their organizations can be found on our website, local12.com. I want to emphasize that our panelists are here in their personal capacities. The views they represent are their own unless they state otherwise. Now, I mentioned a moment ago we have an audience anxious to get started with a lot of questions, but you at home can also be a part of this important discussion. Local 12, Anjanette Levy, is manning our social media desk. She'll explain how you can join the discussion. Anjanette?
Thank you, Mark, and thank you at home so much for joining us tonight, which we want to discuss this very important topic about what is the value of a college education, and we want to hear from you. We want to hear your comments and your questions, and I will be sharing them tonight on our wall over here, and we already have a few comments coming in. We're hoping that our panel can be a part of giving you some information about this very important topic, and we also hope they can answer your questions. So if you'd like to tweet a question to us, you can do so by using the hashtag #YourVoiceYourFuture. You can also post a question on our Facebook page. That's at facebook.com/local or WKRC TV, that is. Mark?
Thanks, Anjanette. Now, this is a town hall, which means it's all about getting questions asked and answered. But we're going to start off with the first question of the evening, not coming from anyone here in the audience, but coming from the moderator. This is my first snap poll question of the evening, and it's going to go to my audience here. I'd like you to respond with the sound of applause. Your two choices and answers are yes and no. I'd like to know how you to respond to this statement. Tell me if you agree. State colleges and universities in Kentucky and Ohio provide good value for the money. Those who believe yes, please applaud. Those who believe no, please applaud. I think that's unanimous. What about the panel? By a show of hands, do the state colleges in California, Kentucky and Ohio provide good value for the money? If you believe yes, please raise your hand. If you believe no, so we have half a no, and the rest are yeses. Very good. All right, let's go to our first question of the evening from this gentleman. Please tell me who you are, where you live, and what's on your mind.
My name is Phil Schwagman. I live in Cincinnati, Ohio, and my wife is a president of the Alumni Association here at NKU, so thank you for inviting me. With the advent of online learning and the seemingly edifice complex that schools have had over the last 20 years, is there an event horizon that is going to have some kind of obsolescence in the future?
Well, let's go right to Jeff to start that off. You're the president of NKU. What about online learning, and how does that impact colleges, universities?
Well, it is growing, and first, before I respond to the question, I want to welcome all of you here who are live with us and who are joining us on television for this event. I'm privileged to serve as the president of Northern Kentucky University, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to our campus, and in particular to our College of Informatics. And I want to greet a special guest of ours, Ellen Rivichel. This room is named after Ellen and her husband. It was in response to an extraordinary gift that Ellen gave to the university, and she's been a very generous contributor to higher education. She does it not because she is going to derive any direct benefit from it. She does it because she believes that a solid college education is the foundation of a strong economy. It promotes civic vitality, and it promotes democracy, the great democracy that we have. So more specifically to your question about online education, certainly technology is changing the way we do education. We're in a room that demonstrates quite vividly how technology is changing. But I don't think technology is a binary choice, that it's either going to be in the classroom or it's going to be fully online. Instead, here at Northern Kentucky University, and I think in the other great universities in our country, what we're realizing is that technology can enhance learning wherever it occurs. It can enhance learning when you're in a classroom, in a room like this, and a professor is doing a lecture, or our students are engaging in exercises. So it is changing education, but it's not going to make physical campuses obsolete.
Well, let me follow up with Sandy, because you're advising young men and women today who are trying to make that decision, what to do, where to go, how to spend, well, in some cases, mom and dad's money. But what about all the online opportunities out there? What kind of advice are they seeking, and what are you giving them?
The population of students that I work with, and maybe just your average 17, 18-year-old, I would not recommend at least an exclusively online type education, because of the amount of self-discipline that an exclusively online college education would take. I think it's great for master's programs and for adults sometimes returning to it, but the students that I work with who have attempted an online-only education have not been as successful for the need of having professors in the classroom, the support of a college or university. So I wouldn't recommend it for at least first-time college coming right out of high school.
And Rich, you wanted to weigh in on this?
Yes, I think that your question is a very good one. The cost of college has been rising faster than people's incomes. Now that's something that cannot exist forever. The benefits of college they're there, but even they're starting to be frayed a little bit around the edges in some cases, because we're getting more and more college graduates who are having trouble getting good, high-paying jobs. So with this going on, people are looking for alternatives. If the price of something goes up, you look for something else. Online is one approach. Some people may be looking at career colleges and other non-degree options that are lower priced as an option to going on to a traditional college or university.
No, all week long we've been getting comments and questions from viewers at home. Now, before we go to our social media, I actually want to check in with one more audience member here and get another question in. So please step over here. Please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what's on your mind.
I'm Laura Urban. I live in Independence, Kentucky. I am an educator in the area. And my question is probably a little broader than on the value to the individual. My question for some of you is, what is the economic impact and social impact on communities that either do or don't have a well-educated citizenry? The value of an education, I think, is valued by communities and employers. What kind of impact is that?
Well, let's go right to an employer, representing an employer. What have you seen, Helen?
Well, I can tell you certainly from Toyota's perspective, the value that we bring to the community as a good employer. We've got people working, they've got families, so they're contributing to the economic vitality of our communities. Certainly important. I will also tell you that not every job we have requires a college education. So it's kind of all over the board for us. Of course, we have the engineering and a lot of the advanced manufacturing, but we also need skilled trades and those people that can go in and build our cars. So it is an economic impact from the fact that these are good paying jobs And those that are college educated, certainly we need those folks in our plants and throughout our company, and making that impact. And then continuing that impact with their children as their children are growing up, and the economic impact in the community as well.
Well, let me put you in the spot for a moment. Does Toyota have a tuition assistance program, yes, or other products in which they make opportunities available for their staff to continue their education?
Yes, we do. We do have tuition reimbursement. So as long as it applies to your job or your career, you can be reimbursed for your education. Yeah. And many people have gotten their degrees after they've come to work for Toyota.
Jeff, you want to jump in on this?
Also, Helen and her company, and Helen in particular, has shown great leadership in recognizing that for an employer like Toyota, investing in institutions and educational programs is important. Not just college, but educational programs across the talent development spectrum.
Well, we already have some questions that have been lined up here for this evening, but folks at home have wanted to be a part of this discussion all week long. They've been sending in comments and questions on both Facebook and Twitter. So let's go to our social media desk. And Jeanette, what do you have for us?
Well, Mark, we have a couple of really great questions and comments from people who are watching at home and following us on Twitter and Facebook. The first one comes from M. Doyle, M.A. We're going to put her comment up on the big wall here. She says, curious to hear why people think there is no need for a college education. College changed my life. Next, we have a question from Facebook, and it comes from Tracy in Claremont County, and she asks, with the rising cost of college and the amount of debt that the graduates leave school with, why are the fluffer courses still offered? And I'm assuming she's talking about those elective courses that all college students are required to take. We, of course, want to get your questions and comments on the air and hopefully get some of your questions answered by our panel. So if you do have a question you'd like to share with us, please join us on Twitter. Tag your question with the hashtag #YourVoiceYourFuture, and also post questions and comments on our Facebook page, and that website is facebook.com/WKRC-TV. Mark?
Thanks, Anjanette. Now, Local 12 is not taking a position on this discussion, but Rich, in the last several weeks, there have been some news stories out there. One university offered a class in Beyonce, another on Miley Cyrus. I mean, come on, is this a good value that people are getting for their money to have classes on pop stars?
I think that's a valid question. I think there's a lot of fluff. I guess that's the term that was used by one of the persons who had Twittered in. I think there's a lot of fluff going on in higher education. I think there's a lot of lack of substance in some areas. Now, I don't want to indict all colleges, universities, or all programs. I certainly am not doing that. But I think people need to look at what are the colleges teaching and what are the kids learning. There's no, you ask a college president, do your seniors know more than your freshmen? They would all say yes. Then you say, prove it. How do we know? Did Northern Kentucky University have a good year last year? Our good friend down here, Jeff, will say yes, but prove it. We don't have a good bottom line in education. Very difficult to measure what we do and how well we do it.
I want to follow up with that with Jeff, because I'm not going to put you on the spot whether you have a class in Beyonce.
Okay.
But let's just talk in general terms, because you certainly are competing with every other college university for sharp people, paying the bills, all the things you need to do as a business. In many respects, it's a business. So how do you balance that with the course offering so it isn't all science, technology, engineering, and math?
That's right. Well, so three things. First of all, I reject the notion that college is filled with lots of fluff. Are there some outliers? Certainly we can quote some anecdotal evidence that maybe there's a course someplace on Beyonce. But our aspiration, our mission at Northern Kentucky University is not just simply to prepare our graduates for their first job, but if you read our mission statement, it's to prepare them for a successful career and a meaningful life. And that's why a university like ours, or any reputable college or university, is charged with the responsibility of expanding the knowledge and experiences of the students who are here. It's not fluff. It is part of the core educational responsibility that we have. Second of all, with respect to learning outcomes, all of the institutions that are accredited have to demonstrate to their accrediting bodies that our courses are improving the learning outcomes of our students. There are rigorous accreditation standards. And the third thing, the test of whether we're doing what we're asked to do, is ask some of the people who employ our graduates. That is one measure, and there are several of them here tonight. They can answer that question. Why is Norm Damaris hiring our graduates from the College of Informatics? It's not just because he likes us. It's because he thinks those graduates are going to add value to his business and his customers.
Just quickly, Sandy, when you have high school juniors and seniors approaching you, what are can you give us maybe briefly some idea of the kinds of questions they ask you when they're perhaps uncertain, they know they want to continue education, but what kinds of questions they ask, what kind of information they're looking for so that they select the right school?
A lot of the students that I work with don't necessarily have an idea of careers and the understanding of linking the careers that they might want to go to college and the pathways. And so a lot of questions revolve around trying to think about what kind of things that you're interested in. And then from those kind of pathways, we look at, well, is a 4-year school the best way to get to your pathway? Is a 2-year school the best way to get to your pathway? There are 9-month certificates that you can get from Scarlet Oaks, or the Oaks is what we have up in Cincinnati, that students can be earning a really good lifestyle and wage also. So a lot of it, we kind of start with where do you want to kind of end up, and then we look at the options from there.
Sir, please step over here. We're back to the audience for questions. Please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what's on your mind.
Andre Ward, Cincinnati, Ohio, and a member of the Board of Regents for NKU. The irony is, however, that while I am an alumnus of this institution, my undergraduate degree is in broadcasting, and I actually interned at WKRC. 20-odd years later, I am now an employer as a self-employed contractor, and do fairly well, I would suspect, by all standards. The discipline by which I brought to that is the question. Where would you find, and I'll ask this to the gentleman at the far end, how then would you suggest that people provide themselves and equip themselves with the proper discipline and or mechanisms for sustaining leadership in a company if they are not college educated? Because it's not about the degree, it's about the experience. Would you agree?
Actually, I would agree. I think that the leaders of America today and tomorrow, almost 100% of them will be college graduates. It's not like the 19th century where we had people like Abraham Lincoln who had very little formal education who could become leaders. Indeed, one of the great tasks of higher ed and one of the passions of higher ed, and I'm a college professor of 49 years standing, so this is what drives me, is to get kids to think critically, to get things, not just to learn about whatever the facts and figures of their discipline is, but be able to analyze a problem if it's put to them and say, here's the way I would go about solving it. So higher ed has a noble purpose and does a pretty good job on the whole of doing it, but it does it at a high price, and there are some problems. Like all good things, there are some problems at it. So I more or less agree with you. You're right.
By the way, Andre seems to be a very successful and accomplished man. It seems to me the way you start that is work at WKRC. But I wanted to follow up with you, Jeff, because do you agree with everything that Richard just said?
In general, yes, I do. And that's why I think that the challenge for higher education is, again, to recognize that we need to collaborate with our educational partners in K through 12, but also with private institutions, with two-year institutions. For example, we have a new program with Gateway, with the Community and Technical College here in Northern Kentucky, in which students can begin at Gateway, but we have 25 distinct pathways from that two-year institution to four-year degree programs here. So that way a student who comes out of high school, who isn't sure what his or her goal is, can start out at an affordable institution, get a grounded education, and then make his or her own choice. And I think it is ill-advised for us to tell 18-year-olds that they need to limit their dreams, that they should have an opportunity to pursue whatever their dream is, and we need to create multiple pathways to ensure that we provide the flexibility, the flexible opportunities for them to pursue their own individual dreams.
I want to remind my live audience here this works best when a lot of you have questions to ask, because you don't want me asking all the questions tonight. But I want to follow up with Sandy for just a moment. According to the Project on Student Debt from the 2012 edition, Ohio had the 9th highest student debt load of all 50 states in the District of Columbia. Kentucky had the 40th. So Kentucky was near the bottom and had most of their college graduates had much less debt load. When you speak to your students who are looking at colleges, what part of the discussion do you offer advice about the financial expense?
I'm always very candid about the money because I feel as a counselor I have a responsibility for students not to be getting into debt that they can't afford when they finish. And the other issue isn't just the debt when they graduate. The issue is if the students don't finish, they still have that debt and they haven't been able to get themselves maybe to an income level that they can pay for that debt. So we have very candid discussions about debt. We have candid discussions about whether maybe going to a 2-year school like Gateway would be better beforehand because it's half the cost of your 4-year schools. There's a lot of pathways to transfer into other 4-year schools. Also, you know, if the student is more interested in not in going into like a specific trade, obviously some of your 9-month schools you can end up with pretty much no debt. So that's a big issue that we talk about. It's not anything that I would at all leave out of the discussion. I think whether you live on campus, whether you don't live on campus is a huge discussion. Research shows students do better when they live on campus. However, you're going to be borrowing at least $10,000 in order to make that decision. So it's an individual decision, but you have to look at the cost.
Now, again, we're not taking positions here at Local 12, but I wanted to share with our audience some information. In 2012, the typical student graduated with $26,600 in student loan debt. If they paid that back, the typical 3.4% rate over a 10-year period, they pay back $38,600, which works out to be a $320 monthly payment. That is a steep amount for a young person starting off in life. So again, just some more information to show the cost, and there certainly may be benefits.
Right. Can I add a statistic, though, that corresponds to that? You're talking about debt of approximately, here at NKU, our graduates' debt on average is about $24,000, a little less than the national average. But the Pew Research Foundation said in the first 10 years of work, between the ages of 25 and 35, that the median salary differential between a high school graduate and a college graduate is $17,500 per year. So it's $24,000 worth of debt to earn in the first 10 years of employment an additional $17,000 a year. I submit that that's a pretty good return on that debt investment.
You want to jump in, Rich?
Yeah, that is correct. Indeed, the rate of return, as the business people would say, on higher ed is often very, very high for a large percentage of people going. But not everyone is the average. Not everyone is the median. Some kids drop out of school. College dropout rates, if you count 2-year and 4-year schools and part-time and full-time students, you can get rates as high as 40%. So there is some risk associated with college. I like the guidance counselor's approach to this. We need to be very realistic with the students. We need to present the good side and the bad side, and the students then have to make a judgment based on their own personal circumstance. College is a good investment for most people. I am not denying that. I completely agree. But there are risks associated. Some majors earn a lot more than other majors. That needs to be taken into account. Graduates of some colleges make more than graduates of other colleges. That needs to be taken into account. It's a very complex issue.
And if I can just quickly follow up with what Jeff had just mentioned a few moments ago, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, an individual with a bachelor's degree had last year had a median salary of $67,140. An individual with a high school diploma or equivalent had a median salary of $35,170. All right, I want to check in with social media in just a few moments, but before I do that, I want to get one more question in from our audience here. Sir, please step over here. Please tell me who you are, where do you live, and what's on your mind.
My name is Jim Cutter. I'm a graduate of NKU, a local business owner, and maybe Dr. Better might be addressed to this question. So when you mention the dropout rate and some of the things that go along with basically the deficiencies that are coming out of our high schools, do you think that leadership that we have in our universities and our corporate world could help assist the primary educators more by addressing issues in the primary ages instead of putting so much pressure on the high schools and the incoming freshmen in the universities to fix, if you will, some of these deficiencies at the late part of the game?
Well, I guess the question was addressed to me first. I completely agree with you that we have a weak link in our system of education in the United States at the K through 12 level. There's lots of data that show that our students are not learning as much as students in other countries and so forth. There is also, I think it's improved, but there is not a completely good articulation between what goes on in the high schools and the elementary schools and the colleges. And I think there could be some improvement in this area. So we have these issues, and I think that this is one of the reasons we get these 40% dropout rates that I mentioned earlier.
Sandy, what do you think? You've seen some of this from your perspective.
Yeah, I was just thinking about, I'm sorry, I was listening to what he was saying. We have been lucky to be in a program at CPS where we partner with the University of Cincinnati, who has wanted to reach down to the younger grades. My specific school only goes down to 7th and 8th, so we're reaching with them. But even reaching down to some 5th and 6th grade in some of the primary. So we have been. I think your idea is spot on that we need to be working in the primary grades as well as the junior high and high school, because you are right. When a student hits senior year and they have a 15 on their ACT, there's not a lot that you can really help them with other than saying, hey, if you really want to go to college, let's go to a Cincinnati State or a Gateway, and you're going to need to take some remedial classes, but we're not denying your dream, but you're going to have to work a lot harder when you get there. And so.
A lot of great questions coming from the audience here, and certainly answers from our panelists, but we're getting questions from our viewers at home. So let's check in with our social media desk. Jeanette, what do you have for us?
We have a lot of great questions still coming in, Mark. Really fantastic. Let's take a look at the wall here. We've posted those questions up there for you to read. The first one comes from M. Doyle, M.A. We're going to hear from her again. She asks, would a 2-year break be beneficial to our students? 2 years of service to mature and then pursue a degree. Our next question comes from Matt Tarka, official. He asks, how can high school students earn college credit while still in high school? Obviously, we know that can cut down on some of the costs once you enter college. And then our next question comes from Alex. He asks, why are college tuition rates on the rise? And is there anything that can be done to lower them? We, of course, want to hear from you at home. We hope we can answer some of your questions here tonight. Please send us questions on Twitter using the hashtag YourVoiceYourFuture. You can also post questions on our Local 12 Facebook page. That's facebook.com/WKRC-TV. Mark?
Thanks, Jeanette. Now, I know there's a question about tuition rates, but before we get to that, I want to go back to an earlier comment that Jeanette addressed. She talked about, 2-year degrees. So we haven't had a chance to talk to Helen for a while. We don't want to leave her out of this discussion. But she mentioned earlier in her remarks that there are employees at Toyota who have, the whole spectrum of degrees, everything from high school through, I'm sure, postgraduate. So can you talk maybe in general terms about the kinds of education levels that some of the Toyota employees have, and what are you looking for?
Well, we have the basic line worker in the plant that's building the vehicles. That's the biggest number of employees that we have. And to tie this to education after high school, a lot of our business, no matter where you are, if you're building a car or if you're an engineer designing a car, the socialization of college is extremely important for our business. Learning how to interact with other people, building a team, conflict management, problem solving, all those things apply to our business and what we do. So whether you're on that line building the car, you've got to work as a team. So some type of socialization activity after high school, and when coming out of high school somebody said wait 2 years, and it depends on the kid, it depends on the student actually, and whether they're ready to go into that or they need to take a break, in my opinion. But we also have skilled trades. We are finding now that we're having trouble filling those jobs because there aren't any, there are not any welders anymore, maintenance people. We've got to fill those jobs for the future. There's a lot of things that technology's taken care of, but those kinds of things. So those are certificate degrees or maybe 2-year degrees that we need desperately. And we decided to start in high school. We've decided to start in middle school and supplement what the counselors are doing by talking about manufacturing careers and actually helping guide the pathway that she mentioned, guide these students through and focusing on manufacturing careers because we got people retiring, and we're going to need to fill those jobs. And we've got good ones right now that are going unfilled because we don't have the folks that we need.
And I want to follow up on the second part that Ann Jeanette had mentioned, and there was a discussion about tuition rates. We've already talked about student loan debt. We've already talked about tuition a few times. Can you, Jeff, give us sort of a sense at what figures into that? Because I think most of us recognize school costs seem to have risen dramatically and not in pace with wages.
Right. Well, so I'll talk about it from the public sector, and there's just a very simple statistic. Over the last 10 or 15 years, the state support that has been provided to the public colleges and universities in Kentucky has decreased faster than we have raised tuition. That is, what I mean is, in not even inflation-adjusted dollars, for every dollar that we have lost of state support, we've only raised tuition by about 90 cents. So to the public who has to pay that tuition check, it appears that the cost of college is going up. But in fact, the expense that we're incurring to deliver educational experience has actually been reduced. We've become more efficient, less costly. The problem, and this is what we can do about it, is we need to change the conversation that public education is no longer a public good. We're privatizing public education, and we need a strong system of public education through pre-kindergarten all the way through postgraduate.
Let's go back to the audience. Please, sir, step over here. Tell me who you are, where do you live, and what's on your mind.
Hi, I'm Rich Baney. I'm chair and CEO of a company based in Cincinnati called Scripps. I'm also an NKU grad. I know companies like mine and Helen's, we're always looking for qualified, educated workers, and we can't find them, right? But what % of Americans have a college degree today? If it's about a third, right? So it means 2/3 of Americans don't have a college degree. We're looking for people. All the companies are. I'm just wondering, is there an argument to be made that more kids need to be going to college, not less? And if so, you know, what prevents that from happening? Anybody?
Rich?
Well, for every 100 people who enter high school, 10 years later, about 25 or 30 of them have a bachelor's degree. There's an enormous amount of attrition along the way. Where is that attrition? First part of it is 25 of those kids, 20 of them, don't graduate from high school. There still is a dropout problem. Then there's the second place where they drop out is they don't go to college. Another 20, a quarter or so of those who graduate from high school. And then you have a third of those who enter college who don't graduate from college, or 40%. So we have an enormous amount of attrition along the way. And if you want to increase the proportion of Americans with college degrees, and I think it's an arguable proposition, we have 115,520 janitors in the United States with bachelor's degrees, and I'm not sure that that's optimal. But if you want to increase it, you've got to look at this attrition rate.
I want to follow up with Helen, because we're talking about all the options that young people have, and I'm going to use Toyota as an example. Certainly, colleges and universities, whether 2 or 4 year, are looking for good people, no criminal records, those sorts of things. But employers are looking for the same kind of people, right? So in many respects, you might be competing with the same good kid out of high school. Why go to school when I can get a pretty decent job at Toyota? Do you have any sense of how a company like Toyota or similar companies look at that competition for the same good kid?
Well, let me just tell you something that's happened over our 27 years now in Kentucky. When we first came to Kentucky 27 years ago and started our first round of hiring, we were finding people that were qualified, no problem. We had a pool of very qualified employees, or people that were to be hired. So we staffed the plant in Georgetown immediately. As we started growing and as we started hiring, needing to hire more people and expanding our business, we weren't finding those qualified people as much. That was dropping off significantly. So part of our situation was, as I talked about a minute ago, we'll teach you how to build a car, but we need you to be a critical thinker. We need you to problem solve. And schools started listening to what we needed and applying that in their classes, whether it's high school or college. So, yeah, back to your question, I think perhaps we are competing a little bit, but that person who comes to work for Toyota can go back to school and Toyota will help them pay for it. You know, that's a nice little benefit that we have for people to encourage them to get finish their degree, if they start their degree, finish their degree, or actually go back to school and maybe move up within the company.
So Jeff, if I can follow up with what Helen has just been talking about, the whole notion of working together, team building, and so forth. So you don't necessarily want to have a campus full of students who are just bookworms and in classes all day long. Do you see value in other kinds of activities and events and teams that build a better student, if you will?
Well, we have some of our students here in the front row, and I certainly wouldn't want to discourage them from continuing to study hard. We certainly want them to study. But it's what they're studying, not just in the classroom and not just in the books. This college is a perfect example of the integration of knowledge and practical skills and analytical skills. Our students who are graduating from this College of Informatics come out well-rounded. They know how to write code, but they also understand how to relate to people who don't look like them or who maybe come from different countries or different socioeconomic backgrounds. That's the value of a college education. They have skills, knowledge, and those other attitudes and aptitudes that make them very valuable in the workplace and make them people who contribute to society.
Let's go back to the audience, sir. Step over here, please. Tell me who you are, where do you live, what's on your mind?
Frank Birkenauer, I'm a graduate of NKU, and I'm the Director of Economic Development for Coleraine Township, Ohio. And I guess my question is more for Jeff and Helen. Workforce development is so important in economic development, and it seems like the states that are consistently successful in realizing workforce development and graduation rates are also successful from an economic standpoint. It seems like the company like Toyota, they realize the importance of education. They're willing to invest in that. Do you think the current funders in the states throughout the region realize the importance of investing in education? Jeff, you talked about the decrease in funding of education. The investment of education is a direct correlation to the success of their state and their employment rates?
Yeah. I get a clear sense that the relationship between business and economic development and higher education is now very close. It used to be kind of a distant relationship, a handshake. Now it's much more fully integrated. If you speak to the Northern Kentucky Chamber or the Cincinnati Regional Chamber, what they'll tell you is workforce development is their #1 objective and that they're looking to partner with education. And companies like Toyota are making extraordinary investments, not just in higher education, but in elementary education. Toyota has been a true leader in that respect. There are many other organizations, companies throughout this area that are recognizing that we have to have a close partnership. And we need to be, in higher education, we need to be responsive. In other words, but responsive to the needs of those employers. And by that I mean we can't simply invite them on campus to interview students when they're prepared to graduate and say, ask them to employ our students. What we do here at Northern is we have a collaborative relationship with them in the development of academic programs so that they have greater assurance that our students are prepared to be the kind of employees that they want to hire. That's the future of higher education, a collaborative relationship between business and economic development and academic programs.
Let's take it back a few years at the public school level, and let's talk about Sandy. What do you see, what efforts are there in the community to include state and local government to help a process so that the children are better prepared? We know it's the 3 R's are part of it, but is there more that can be done or is being done to prepare students to move on to the next level of education?
In kind of also continuing with what he was speaking about, our specific school, as well as several other schools in Cincinnati, have business partnerships. Our partnership has been with General Electric for like 27 years, and we have all kinds of programs helping kids all the way down to the elementary ages at different vocational tracks, different career tracks, what it takes to be professional. And it's been awesome. I know that Lexotica has a partnership with Withrow. And so one of the pieces that I know CPS has made a value and very important is the partnerships with the business communities so that we are preparing our students for workforce development.
I want to go to Rich for just a moment. I want to cite some statistics from the National Center for Education Statistics, which is with the Department of Education. According to their research, the 2005 cohort, which was the last class I looked at, the graduation rates for students entering college kind of shocked me at how relatively low it was. For all 4 institutions, it was 38.6%. For public institutions, it was 32%. For nonprofit institutions, it was 51.9%. And this surprised me a little bit. For-profit institutions was 35.7%. So somewhere in the range of around a third to maybe 50%. Why do so few students graduate in 4 years?
Well, that's a good question. One factor is an incentive factor. Why graduate? Going to college is fun. Going to college are the best years of your life for many kids. The government is providing loans. The students are maybe ill-advised to be taking a lot of these loans out, but they're at 19 or 20, you don't think straight all the time. So that's part of it, is that the college experience is a great experience, and there's positive dimensions to it. But the colleges get subsidy monies in many cases. They get tuition. So if the kid hangs around 5 years, they get 25% more than if they're there 4 years. Not always, but it often works that way. So there's not a lot of incentives in there to get the students through in time. Another factor is we admit some students to college that frankly just don't belong there. And you mentioned higher rates of implied rates of graduation among the private schools, which are the nonprofit private schools. They generally, on average, have somewhat higher selective admissions policies. And so they weed out students who they think are probably not going to make it through. And that's another issue. But it is bordering on something of a national scandal, I think.
Jeff?
And they sound interesting, but they're not an accurate representation of what higher education looks like. Okay. First of all, those statistics are based upon the first-time, full-time freshman cohort, which is not representative of all of the people who are going to college. I want to introduce you to Chris Hammond. Okay. Chris is an employee of NKU, a Marine Corps veteran, served 2 tours of combat, father of 3. He is an employee here, and he's a student here. He cannot possibly expect to graduate in 4 years. So when we speak about timely graduation, we need to be responsive to the individual needs of our students. I don't consider him a failure if he doesn't graduate in 4 years. I consider him a hero, and we're going to continue to support him.
One quick follow-up. Does Rich make a valid point that part of college is a natural filtering process, perhaps, that some kids realize that maybe it isn't the right thing for me? And is that okay?
Of course it is. I mean, life is a filtering process, right? It begins from the time you start competing in Little League Baseball. And some people make the team and some people don't. So of course there's a filtering component to it. And does higher education need to do a better job of retaining and graduating students? Absolutely. And we have some of our Board of Regents members here, and we are focusing on that. We need to do that. But it is not fair, as I said, to look at that graduation statistic and condemn an individual institution or an industry as a whole.
All right, I want to get one more question from our audience here, and then I'm going to have to check in with social media to see what's happening there. Sir, please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what's on your mind.
Chris Reeves. I live in Union, Kentucky. I'm a school counselor at Beechwood High School, so I deal with college admissions and financing school every day. I'm an adjunct here at Northern, so my class is right here.
They all have A's tonight?
They all have A's, period. So they're happy about that. My question kind of goes back to helping the student and their families. How do we help people who come from underrepresented populations, first-generation students? How do we help them become good consumers? Because that's what we're talking about earlier in this broadcast is making the right choice and being able to afford that and know you can get through this. So how do we help those people become good consumers when resources are low and counseling ratios are high?
Sandy, any thoughts?
I completely agree with that. It's totally educating the parents, educating the students, starting as young as you can start. We now have 7th grade in our school, so helping them to understand the different pathways and the different choices. And I think just really speaking the numbers. It's interesting, one of our programs that the students can participate in is this program called Naviance, and one of the things it has on it is this thing where kids can choose all these colleges all over the country. However, I feel that using that tool is sometimes not helpful for the students that I work in, because we need to look at the realistic situation that most of our students are Pell Grant eligible, which means the total amount of money that, unless they get scholarships, the total amount of money they're going to have is about $16,000 total. So therefore, we need to look at schools where that will work, and maybe a work study on top of that, but we need to be looking at those types of schools and spending our energies there and talking about the issue of, are you going to commute and live at home, or are you going to live on campus? And again, I said research shows that students, especially first generation and underrepresented, do better living on campus. However, you're going to be borrowing at least $10,000 most likely to do that. So is that it's a family choice, it's a personal choice. When you have first generation, sometimes there's not as much family support there to help them make those decisions, but maybe they have people maybe at their church, or maybe a teacher or a coach or someone that also can come alongside and help those make the decisions. But it is difficult, and I think that the parents and the students should have all the information as they're making their choices.
And Jeff, you wanted to weigh in on this?
Yeah, and I think this is another area where we in higher education can do better. We can do a better job of making a lot less complex financial aid and the cost of higher education. The federal government doesn't really help us. Any of you who have college-age kids recently who've tried to fill out that FAFSA, you know how complicated it is. So we as higher education need to make it more simple so that students can make more informed choices about the relative benefits of the choices that they're making.
If I may just jump in and agree with Jeff. My wife, too, is a guidance counselor, a high school guidance counselor in a low-income community in Appalachia. And she said the single largest obstacle for her, no matter how much information she gave, no matter how hard she pushed the low-income kids, was getting them to fill out the FAFSA form. It's an incredibly complex instrument, or historically has been. I think it's been simplified some. But we have put barriers in the way of low-income kids getting full information and also filling out the basic paperwork. And I think that is something very simple, easy to handle, that ought to be done and should be done quickly.
Well, a lot of great questions coming from our audience here, but we also have a lot of comments and questions coming from our viewers at home. Let's go to our social media desk. Anjanette, what do you have for us?
Still a lot of great comments and questions coming in, Mark. We're going to start with one from Billy Sarge. It's up on our wall. He says, the voice of someone else can play a big part in your future. Take as much advice as you can before making a decision. Obviously a good piece of advice to high school students and those entertaining a career in college. Our next comment comes from Jennifer Gwen Hart. She says, or asks rather, why did my general education credits cover the exact same content as my high school freshman year instead of building upon that foundation? And our final question comes from Tom. He asks, are the many for-profit colleges opening all over the area beneficial to the youth out of high school? We want to answer all of those questions and so many more, so send us your questions on Twitter using that hashtag, Your Voice, Your Future, and you can also post those questions on our Facebook page, facebook.com/WKRC-TV. Mark?
Thanks, Anjanette. So let's go right to, well, the employer over here. So, Helen, does it make a difference to Toyota whether someone has a degree from NKU? I'm going to put you on some tough ground here. NKU versus University of Phoenix.
I'm not sure that I could actually answer that question in terms of the hiring side of it, because I don't do that. I would think that for the well-rounded individual, the person that we're looking for, the educated, in addition to that person that's been socialized and been on a campus setting, and is going to be better at NKU or Thomas More, or where you can go and be a part of what's going on at one of these local state schools. Yeah.
Jeff, you wanted to weigh in?
I was going to say, if you had asked her the question to compare University of Phoenix with the University of Kentucky, because she's wearing her UK blue tonight, she might have answered the question more directly. But I think going back to Dr. Vedder's point, I would, if somebody is making that choice as a prospective student, I would ask those private institutions, those for-profit institutions, for what are not just their costs, but what are their success rates in terms of graduation rates in a timely manner, and what are their actual employment rates, and not just employment in a job after they graduate, but has it advanced them on that career ladder. I would get that data before I'd make that choice.
We're going to go back to our audience. Please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what's on your mind.
My name is Patia Tabor. I live in Erlanger, and I'm with the Counseling Graduate Student because I am a graduate student. And I've seen a lot of focus on technology in this panel, and I'm wondering, there was an article in a Times Higher Education article that said that NKU's history program was compared better, more favorably, to Harvard, Oxford, and Cambridge. given the skill sets that degrees like history teach, what do you see the value in having an arts and humanities degree as opposed to a science and technology?
So, Sandy, you're recommending schools and providing advice and so forth. What do you tell the students about their field of study? Does a major even matter?
We hit the STEM fields, honestly, pretty hard because if you just look at statistics, there's a lot of jobs there. However, just because there's jobs in that particular field, not every student is going to be able to be an engineer. I know how difficult those programs are. So on one hand, you know, we hit the math and the science and those types of careers. But on the other hand, we work with, you know, the individual students. The population, you know, a lot of the students that I work with are underrepresented, and a lot of them don't have a really clear understanding of a career pathway. They know like what they see on television, or they know what they see in their commute, you know, like a nurse or different people that they've just been exposed to is kind of what they, so a lot of times when we're talking about majors, we go over it, but a lot of them get into college and then discover maybe what pathway they want to choose. So although we, you know, try to emphasize some of the career pathways where there's a lot of jobs, you know, it's an individual student thing, and also just with the knowledge that a lot of times the students will change their mind when they get to college.
Rich.
Last point, the average worker at age 30 or 35 is not doing what they majored in college. And if you look at liberal arts graduates in traditional areas of liberal arts, the humanities, for example, they aren't doing quite as bad as you might think. They may not have an advantage getting that initial job out of college, but they have often developed very good writing skills, very good critical thinking skills, and so forth. Payscale.com has published some data on mid-career people by majors that show that philosophy majors make about as much as business administration majors. And you know, you think of philosophy majors are the most impractical thing in the world from a job point of view, whereas business administration is eminently practical. But the mid-career differentials are not what you think they might be. So liberal arts shouldn't be completely ruled out even from a purely vocational perspective.
If I can, just share a couple of quick statistics. Again, we're not taking positions in this debate, but according to the data we found for the year 2010, the Association of American Medical Colleges reported that of the students accepted into medical schools, 43% of entrants who had biological or science degrees, 47% had physical sciences, and 45% had social sciences, and those numbers don't add up to 100%, and I have no idea what that means now. So we'll skip that debate point for a moment, because that must be wrong. But I can tell you, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, it looked at several college majors. Those in computers and math had the highest potential lifetime earnings of about $3,044,000, and education majors had the lowest at $1.8 million. So the Census Bureau, according to its data, through the American Community Survey, found that there are majors that tend to have better potential lifetime earnings than some others. Let's go to one more question from this young gentleman over here. Please tell us who you are. Step one over here next to me. Where do you live, and what's your question?
Okay, my name is Arturo Minera. You can call me Artie. I live in Cincinnati, but my time here spent in northern Kentucky might suggest otherwise. And what's on my mind? I've been curious since the beginning of this panel. My dad was sworn in this January as the first Hispanic member of the Cincinnati Public School Board, Daniel Minera, and he's also the Hispanic Outreach Director of City Gospel Missions in Cincinnati. And what I've seen is, and what he's taught me through mentoring me as a father, but also as a community leader, is the importance of relationship. And I saw that throughout this panel, we had mentioned a lot about the importance that you get in the college education is the ability to have networks and to build as a team leader and part of a team. And the question is, to more sort of Rich, is how do you propose doing it otherwise without having that college experience to get involved in the community and to get a better job to support your family?
Okay. And before we go to that answer, I'm going to have to take a moment and say goodnight to our viewers who are watching us on Local 12 on the local TV broadcast because we have to continue on with our regular programming. We're continuing this event with our local12.com website, so continue watching us on the webcast, but those of us watching us tonight on Local 12, we have to say goodnight. But before we do, we want to thank our hosts here at Northern Kentucky University for the use of their wonderful facility. And for the viewers at home, I'd like you to watch this video so you get an idea of who they are.
Located just over the Ohio River from Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky University attracts students from around the world. More than 15,000 students and 55,000 alumni have come here to take advantage of the small class sizes and personalized programs that define the university. There are undergraduate, graduate, legal, and doctoral programs geared toward real-world problem solving. As NKU approaches its 50th anniversary in 2018, the administration will tell you there's a commitment here toward academic innovation. The university's Digitorium, for instance, has been the site of many high-profile, high-tech community demonstrations. Many have made news on Local 12, like viewings of political debates where members of the audience could provide immediate reaction to what they were watching. NKU considers its College of Informatics a model for 21st century universities, blending art, science, technology, and the business of information together. Last year, NKU launched one of the nation's first undergraduate data science programs. Its cybersecurity program is getting national attention and preparing students for one of the country's hottest job markets. 46 years old and going strong, NKU has blossomed into an academic, social, and cultural hub for the entire greater Cincinnati region.
You've been watching a live town hall discussion on the real value of a college education, and we invite you to continue to participate through our Facebook page and Twitter using the hashtag #YourVoiceYourFuture. The discussion continues online now at local12.com. You'll see live event. Click on Watch Now. That'll take you where you need to be. We hope you found that informative our evening. Thanks for watching. I'll see you at 11 o'clock. We now take you back to NKU and more of tonight's town hall with moderator Mark Hyman.
Invest in colleges of education and in paying our teachers what they deserve to teach our children.
This is a great opportunity for me to ask my next snap-ball question of my audience here. I'd like to respond with the sound of applause. Your two choices and answers are yes or no. And let me set up the statement first, because when it comes to federal loans, they're pretty much agnostic to what the field of study is by an individual. So please respond on whether or not you agree with this statement. The free market should be the prime mover behind college loans to include loan amounts, rates, and fields of study. Those who believe yes, please applaud. Those who believe no, please applaud. So when we talk about the whole issue of fields of study, and there are certainly students who gravitate to certain things because they have an appreciation or a fondness for it. Do you have a sense, Jeff and Sandy, I know you spoke earlier about younger people don't really have an idea what they want to study, but do you have a sense of what goes into that filtering process and why students pick majors that may not serve them well in life? Could have been enjoyable, they might have done well at it, but what role should schools play at the secondary level and the post-secondary level to help guide students so they don't take a major that may not set them up for the success perhaps they would like? I'll start with Sandy first.
I think schools that provide some type of career assessment and career education at an early age. CPS has invested in something called Naviance, and it goes right now to 7th grade, and they just start thinking about careers and learning about careers and learning that it merges personality tests and learning styles and all of that, and then they can create like a portfolio so that when they are a senior, they've kind of taken a lot of those other things into consideration, not just salary. I think what happens, honestly, is, at least I found this with my students, is you see this salary sheet on an engineer makes this much, a pharmacist makes this much, okay, I'm going to do one of those things just based on the salary without even looking, are you good in math? Are you good in sciences? You know, what does that person do? Is that something you'd want to do? So getting beyond just there's jobs and there's this much money, really helping students with personality assessments, learning full in that particular career and in that major when they go to school. Because GE is our partner, we have a lot of students in that want to be engineers because they provide some internships for our students. But we've had very few students, you know, once they've gone to either Ohio State or UC, NKU or Wright State, the engineering programs, they're tough programs. And so a lot of students end up changing into something different because it is difficult.
I think two things. One of the things that we're doing here at NKU is more closely aligning academic planning, academic advising with career planning. You know, historically colleges you've gone to an academic advisor, and I know from my own personal experience, I didn't meet with anyone in career planning until March of my senior year. Not a wise move. So we are integrating career planning with academic advising at the outset of a student's arrival here at NKU to try to align the academic program with then career choices. And so I think that will produce better results. The other thing that I think higher education is doing better than we have historically is providing experiential learning opportunities to our students very early on. So for example, my daughter who recently graduated from Dr. Vedder's great university, she decided when she started college, she wanted to be an athletic trainer. Well, it only took her 2 weeks on a site as a student in athletic training to decide she didn't want to do that. If that had not happened until after she graduated, that would not have been a good outcome. So here at NKU, and I think at so many other colleges and universities, we're providing hands-on, practical, experiential learning opportunities very early so that students, that we assure that their career expectations align with their actual interests.
Mark, can I comment
Please.
on that? We're about to make an investment in a brand new program called yours Naviance. It's called Navigo Scholars, and we're going to actually go into the schools. Students are going to have career coaches. These are for manufacturing jobs, whether it's engineering, skilled trades, advanced manufacturing, the whole technology thing. And students are going to have career coaches starting as freshmen so that they can navigate, that's Navigo, through high school so that when they come out, Jeff gets them, they're ready to go to do whatever it is they want to do, or David gets them, or Gateway gets them, they're ready for a 2-year degree. They have a better idea. And then they find out all this stuff about these careers early on, so they don't go to school, college, and waste a lot of money maybe. Brand new concept, just doing a little bit more than what the counselors can do. I mean, the counselors, public school like everybody else, cutbacks, and you can't have the counseling maybe that you used to have. So we're going to invest. We're treating it as a recruitment expense, not an out-and-out donation to say this is what we need and this is what we're going to do to get them.
And there's another example of the way in which universities can collaborate with the K through 12 system and with businesses. That program is going to be housed on our campus.
Yep.
So it's going to operate from our campus with great support from the business community and collaborations with the high schools. That's the education of the future.
Now, Jeff, if you tell us your daughter went to Ohio University
Correct.
only because NKU waitlisted her, then everyone will know your admissions process is absolutely fair.
Just for the record, no, she chose to go to Ohio University before I ever came to NKU.
Let's go back to our
choice, by the way.
Let's go back to the audience. Please, sir, tell us who you are, where you live, and what's on your mind.
Good evening, panelists. My name is John Jose. I'm originally from Louisville, Kentucky, and just recently the student body president-elect, representing our students here. But my question for you guys are, can you discuss the importance of a college education as a whole and the different strategies to help keep the costs affordable for all students seeking an education in an environment where education is the primary industry being cut by the government? Thank you.
Well, I'm sure we have 2 points of view here, so I'm going to start with Rich.
Well, I wrote a 242-page book on why college costs have been rising a lot, and it's very difficult in a sentence or two or a minute even to answer that question fully. But it is true that there are a lot of costs that are rising in colleges that are happening that are perhaps somewhat questionable. Look at the amount of non-instructional support staff in universities. Just look at the numbers of them. They have exploded in the last 20 years. And I think we have sometimes bureaucratized higher ed a little too much and we've gotten a little too much away from the basics. Now, I don't think it is true at a school like Northern Kentucky. I really don't. Than it is at, say, a large research flagship university, or even some of the private schools. But it is a national problem. We have had costs rising in all kinds of areas, and I could, have more time to talk about why do we use buildings 8 or 9 months a year on most campuses. I'm not saying here at Northern Kentucky. Why do classrooms? Why are they empty? Why do kids get degrees in 4 years rather than 3 years? Are they picking crops in the summer? The internship programs, some of them do, are very valuable, by the way, and that is one area where I think there's been enormous improvement. That goes back to Jeff's original point about earlier, that we have integrated but there are a lot of costs that are way out of line with what is going on in the rest of American life. It takes more people to educate a student today than it did 40 years ago. It doesn't take as many people to build a Toyota as it did 40 years ago. That is a problem.
But before I get Jeff to respond, I actually want to add something to this mix because I want to get your perspective on this. Stacy Dale and Alan Krieger published a paper at the National Bureau of Economic Research in June of 2011. The title was Estimating the Return to College Sensitivity Over the Career Using Administrative Earnings Data. Essentially looking at the issue is attending an elite college. Is it worth it? Their kind of the foot stomper point at the end was, our results suggest that the typical student does not unambiguously benefit from attending the most selective college to which he or she is admitted. Rather, our results would suggest that students need to think carefully about the fit between their abilities and interests, the attributes of the school they attend, and their career aspirations.
Right.
Would you agree with that?
Yes, to this extent. In the same way, no one unambiguously profits in the stock market, right? You can lose money in the stock market if you make investments that are not wise. That's why I think your comment earlier about reconciling your academic choices with your interests and your financial capacity. On this issue of cost, I mean, we don't want robots teaching in our classroom. That's why Toyota can make cars more cheaply, because they can manufacture those cars with robots. We don't want, I didn't want my daughter who went to Ohio University to be taught by a robot. I wanted her to be taught by a talented professor who was invested in her academic success and her future. The other reasons we have added those non-instructional staff is because we are accepting different students into higher education than we did 50 years ago. Those students don't have the family support structures to navigate higher education that the privileged students that were exclusively admitted to higher education 50 years ago. We need to provide those academic advisors. We need to provide financial aid counselors. We need to provide mental health counselors. So there's many things that we do at universities responsibilities that we have to our student success that requires us to have those talented, dedicated staff.
So is, for lack of a better word, is culture an important issue as well in the
No, if we are going to promote access and opportunity to students who didn't have an opportunity to go to higher education 50 years ago, access that without success is not genuine opportunity. So if we're going to provide opportunities, as I think we must, to all students, irrespective of their family or socioeconomic background, we need to have support personnel in place to support their success, and it costs money.
All right, well, I want to get one more question from our audience here, and then I have to check in with Ann Jeanette. But before we do that, please tell us who you are, where you live, and what's on your mind.
My name is Tracy Schwegman. I live in Cincinnati, Ohio. I am president of the NKU Alumni Association, and I think you folks have actually just recently touched on the question, my original question, which related to the value of internships and co-op opportunities and the value of a practical application. We heard a lot about discipline and social skills and skill sets. I think you folks have covered that, but if you want to touch on that again, well, you're welcome to. My second question then would be, you're starting to hear out in the world the concept that perhaps an undergraduate degree is becoming the new high school diploma. What are your thoughts on that?
I want to start with Sandy on that.
I think my students, we hear that. I think when you look at just in terms of jobs and things like that, having that bachelor's degree, having that undergraduate degree is really important. However, as she touched on, there's also a lot of holes right now for like welding, I know was one that she mentioned. I know HVAC is another field that people are retiring from. There's a lot of these certificate programs that you're doing something like that, you can make as much as someone with a bachelor's and maybe even a master's degree. So I think that for the reasons that they talked about with the bachelor's degree, with the leadership and the social, all those kind of skills, I would agree that I think it's really important. However, I don't feel it's the only place that you can get those kinds of things as well.
Any follow-up on that?
Well, I would say those experiential learning opportunities, we have students who participate in this college and many others in experiential learning opportunities all across the community. And it's through our partnership relationships with businesses and nonprofit organizations that help us to create those experiential learning opportunities.
Rich?
In 1970, 10% of Americans had 4-year degrees or more. Now over 30% do. The college degree used to be something that went largely to a relatively elite population. And the people that got those degrees thought they had, and they usually did have, a ticket to a middle class, a comfortable middle class or upper class life. That is no longer true. It's no longer possible when you have already 30 or 40%. Not everyone can have high paying jobs when you have close to half the population going to college. So increasingly, students are graduating from college, and some of them are ending up in big box retail stores. There's 1 million working in big box retail stores, more than soldiers in the Army. So what do they have to do? They have to do internships to demonstrate that they're somehow special. They have to get master's degrees in some cases. They have to differentiate themselves from their fellow students in some way. Leadership positions while in college and so forth. So we're seeing a lot more, as my experience as a college professor, much more opportunistic looking around by college students of trying, how can I prove that I am somehow special? It's not as simple as it was a generation or two ago.
Well, I know a lot of folks here have had some tough questions, a lot of great answers, but we've got some folks at home who want to be a part of this discussion. And I do want to remind our audience here that we're getting down to the last minutes on this, so if you have any more questions here, we want to get them in as quickly as possible. But let's check in with our social media desk. Anjanette, what's the latest?
Lots of really great questions, Mark, and it's a shame we're not going to be able to get them all in, but I'm going to share a bunch of them with you right now. The first one comes from Alicia Fisher. She asks, if public school teachers are evaluated based on their students' test scores, then how are professors evaluated when there is really much more at stake? Our next comment comes from Judy. She asks, the middle class is being left out. The lower income families can go to school funded. Then we have Jennifer Jones. She says, my education is a source of pride that can never be taken from me. College has opened doors and new ways of thinking. And next we have Kara White. She says, they say the average college student changes their major 5 times. Is this true? And is the process difficult? And finally, we have M. Doyle, MA again. She asks, Tennessee has talked about no-cost 2-year degrees, pro or con? So obviously lots of great questions and comments coming in. We'll try to get more of them in here as we go on tonight. If you'd like to share those again on Twitter, #YourVoiceYourFuture, and you can also post those on Facebook at facebook.com/WKRC-TV. Mark?
Thanks, Anjanette. Now I want to go back with Jeff, because anecdotally people say, well, merit scholarship money isn't available like it used to be. Is that a true statement, or is that just a wives' tale?
Well, we're making a substantial investment in merit aid. I wish we had the capacity to make more. I also wish we had the capacity to provide institutional financial aid for students who need financial assistance. But all across the spectrum of higher education, institutions are investing their own money to support the students and to attract outstanding students to their institution.
And what have you seen, Sandy, in terms of aid that's available to high school students?
I've seen scholarships and options go down over the years. I see a lot of the students that I work with at my particular school don't have necessarily like 25 to 30 ACTs. My average is about 15. And our GPAs may not be that high, and there's just not scholarships out there for students like that. So, really working on grants and things like that. There's less options. Now, for the students that do have the higher GPAs and the higher ACTs, there's a lot more competition, and I have found that students are more successful with the institutions. You know, if you decide, hey, I want to go to NKU, then you get on their site and you just try to apply for everything that's on there. You'll have a lot more luck with going with your institution on getting those than you do just like FastWeb or whatever it is that the students fill out for scholarships. So really working with the institution that they plan to go with is the best way to look at money. And the majors, some majors also offer money, but overall I would say the dollars I have seen are less.
And this is where the guidance counselors can be so helpful. Those students who are coming with parents who are well educated, they know to be proactive and to contact admissions offices and try to obtain more aid. That's where the guidance counselors who are serving those populations can be so helpful to support their students in being proactive and seeking out other forms of assistance. Because we have 9,000 students who are applying to NKU for our freshman class next year. We can't be proactive with every one of those students, but we're very responsive to every student who contacts us, and that's where guidance counselors are so critical.
On that entire theme, and this has already come up once throughout the discussion this evening about those first-time college students, the first ones out of their families and so forth. Jeff, have you seen any data, or even just perhaps anecdotally, and I'm not sure if the word legacy is a good word or a bad word, but those families who have a long track record of sending generation after generation after generation to school, are those the ones who tend to be very successful in getting not only access but completing and graduating? And if that is it, then how do we break through that other generations or those other groups who just don't have a history of college attendance?
Well, at NKU we try to strike the right balance. So for example, we're quite receptive to the children of parents who have graduated from NKU, and we certainly take that into account in our admissions process, and we certainly want to foster those alumni continued engagement with the institution. But 50% of our undergraduate students are first generation in their family to go to college at all. So we are very receptive to reaching out to student populations in high schools like yours that have first generation college students. We think that's a distinctive attribute of our university, and we think it's part of our professional and moral responsibilities to educate the next generation of leaders.
And
well, I agree with what Jeff said, but I want to say there's a lot of diversity in higher ed. There's all different kinds of schools. And if you look at private elite schools, there is allegations, and there's been a good bit of empirical evidence supporting that there's favorable admission standards given to children of previous grads and so forth, strong legacy preferences. And you can make a case for it on some grounds, but it also could be viewed that in an egalitarian society where we believe that people should be rewarded on merit, that there is some real questions about whether this is appropriate when there are government subsidies and so forth involved, whether we should condone this type of behavior. And it's a policy issue. It doesn't apply to the NKUs of the world, but it does apply to the Harvards and the Notre Dames and so forth.
I think it is important. I think that is an important policy question. I'm not sure I would suggest, and I'm not sure you would support, that the government should get into regulating whether or not universities can do that or not.
Let's go back to the audience. Please tell us who you are, where you live, and what's your question.
My name is Matthew Tarka. I'm a junior at Dixie Heights High School in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky. And I've been noticing just in my classes that we're all taught to do the same and not to truly excel as we can in college. What are colleges working with education boards at all to help bridge the gap between high school education and college education in general?
Well, so we have a very proactive dual credit program. We call it school-based scholars. Our goal is that within the next 2 years to have 1,000 Northern Kentucky high school students who are taking college courses at NKU, either on our campus or with our faculty in the high school. So we're trying to address that, and I know my colleagues at Thomas More and Gateway are trying to do the same. So I think all colleges and universities are embracing this responsibility, and some are doing it more proactively than others, but that's the way in which, one of the ways in which we're trying to address the issue identified.
Along I completely agree with that. In Ohio, we have had for a long time a very, very good program that has allowed for dual enrollment and dual credit, even high school and college credit. with indeed high school kids going to the college. The high school's losing some of the money and given to the colleges to pay for it. I think that we are that the notion that a person is ready for college at 18 in all cases is silly. Some kids ought to be in college at 16. They may not lack the social skills and so forth, but they're certainly intellectually capable. Others, maybe at 40, I don't know. And that we need to do much more with the high school. The advanced placement is good. International baccalaureate is good. There are some programs that are developed, but we need to do much more. We're missing out a lot on what we could do in that area.
Hey, on this topic, and I'm going to go to Sandy, and this is a little kind of off topic, but it's part of what we're discussing. According to the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, the U.S. out of 34 industrialized states ranks 25th when it comes to math skills by our high school students, and 18th in science. What can we do better? Because there was a time where I think we thought we were the best in the world when it came to public education, and now we seem to be falling behind. What are some of the remedies that perhaps might work?
I'll just talk a little bit about my experience. I know in the school that I'm working in, we have the district requires so many years of math, and the state requires so many years of math and so many years of science, and we have taken those and expecting our students to have a science class every year, 7 through 12, a math class every year, 7 through 12, to better prepare them for college, because we do see that as a deficit when the kids go on to either a 2-year or 4-year school. Even your programs for welding or electrician, even those kind of things, you have to have a certain level of algebra skills and things like that. So definitely math and science is something that the high schools are really trying to do more with, as well as industry partnering with us, similar to Toyota.
Let's go back to the audience. Sir, please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what's your question?
I'm Galt Ragsdale. I live in Edgewood, Kentucky, and I'm a faculty member here at NKU. And I'd like to ask you a question about the conversation, changing the conversation on funding higher education. Do you think we can get to the point that we can fund higher education through the equivalent of a GI Bill, which was wildly successful in terms of not only higher education, but also vocational education? It also bolstered the civic engagement of the economy and also civic engagement in terms of democracy as well. So can we get that conversation started? For example, I know in the GI Bill, American Legion posts throughout the country put pressure on elected officials in Congress to get that bill passed in 1944.
And I think the data shows that it was the GI Bill, perhaps more than anything else, led to the explosive growth in post-secondary education in America. Jeff, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think we can change the conversation if we do two things. One is if we can refer to education not as a cost but as an investment, and if we in education, particularly higher education, can do a better job of demonstrating the outcomes. Not just rewarding us for putting students in the seats, but rewarding us for a successful educational experience. And I think if we change the conversation in that way, in terms of better outcomes, measurable outcomes, we can then do a better job of changing the conversation at the outset of persuading our elected officials to view education as an investment.
Rich?
This is nice sounding, and in many ways I agree with you. But the reality is, I'm just talking about the political realities, is that we have an aging population, we have an entitlement society that is imposing enormous burdens on us, particularly in the healthcare area, and we're being squeezed by a lot of other competing sectors, and it makes it very, very difficult to make that case. It doesn't mean you shouldn't try. Indeed, it may argue that you should try harder. But I think you look at what's going back to the NKU problem with falling funding. It's true all over the country. We are privatizing public education to a considerable extent. And the reason is the public, through the political process, doesn't feel it's a valuable enough investment. So the way it is run now. And I think we've got to have some big changes to get what the gentleman is suggesting to happen.
Well, we live in a democracy, so the people who represent us will represent our views. So we should exercise that opportunity to make sure that our elected officials respond to our concerns and our needs.
We're at the point, I think we have our final question of the evening. Please tell us who you are, where do you live, and what's your question?
Hello, I'm Shawn Nordheim. I'm from Butler, Kentucky, and I'm with the College of Health Professions. And my question, I think, is to President Mearns, that he's the only one that can answer this. A large part of what I do is I take students into the hospital setting. And one of the greatest challenges for our students is knowing how other disciplines, whether it be physical therapy, occupational therapy, social services, maybe palliative care, but how do these disciplines impact what we do as nurses? And to be quite honest, the only thing that's going to help us meet that is our Health Innovation Center. So the General Assembly just approved this yesterday. And I guess I want to know what's the next step, and is there anything that will keep this from being a reality? Because we've really been looking forward to this building for many, many years. She's excited about it.
Yes, well, we're excited. What she was referring to is the fact that the General Assembly has agreed to provide $97 million to Northern Kentucky University to build a Health Innovation Center. And the reason they were persuaded to do it was because of the concept that you just described. Creating a facility. It's not about building a building. It's creating a facility in which we can provide interprofessional, interdisciplinary education so that we can train the next generation of healthcare professionals to work as teams. That will improve health outcomes and drive down the cost of healthcare, and we're going to be on the cutting edge of that.
That's great.
Well, I think we're going to have to leave it there because we've run out of time and questions. But, you know, I think we know that education is something that we want people to experience, whether it helps them prepare to enter their local neighborhood or the global community. The question is, what is the cost? What is the trade-off? What's appropriate? We do know we want to prepare the next generation to be even better off and to have a better world than the one we've lived in. I'd like to thank Northern Kentucky University for the use of their wonderful facility here tonight, and certainly encourage everyone to watch Local 12 News at 11 for highlights of tonight's town hall and other breaking news. On behalf of our panel, our audience here, the staff and crew of Local 12, I'd like to thank you at home for joining us. Finally, we salute our armed forces, law enforcement, firefighters, EMTs, and other emergency personnel for all that they do. I'm Mark Hyman. Good night. Thank you very much.
Hey, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.